Hey everybody, this is your girl Kiara Jones, and welcome to the Jones Girl Live. Today is going to be a very special um, video. It's really important. The topic that we're going to be talking about today is sexual assault in the church, and the rape culture in the church, and how God feels about that. And I'm looking in the wrong way. The camera's over here. Uh, so I have my really good friend. She's actually more like a little sister to me, Stacey Dennis. Well, Wheeler. I'm sorry, Stacey Wheeler. Say hi, Stacey.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Yes, she is going to be joining me today because she is going to be sharing her testimony of just her experience with sexual assault. She was assaulted as a teenager by her youth pastor. And we're going to walk through this, this entire testimony, this entire story. I'm going to be asking her some questions, and we're going to have a discussion about just the system in the church that often causes the victims to be suppressed, that wants to muzzle the voices of children, men, women, whoever, who have been abused by people who are in power. Especially in the house of God. And one of the things that bothered me, because I expect the world to be the world. I always say that I expect the world to be the world. But when you say you love Christ, when you say that you are representing Jesus, I have an issue when you use God's word to carry out abuse. And her testimony, as heartbreaking as it is, I have seen her strength and her overcoming and even her healing process up to this point. So Stacey, welcome. I want to start out, give me a little bit of your background, because I know you weren't raised in a Christian home, right?
Right.
Right. Your sound is on? Yeah, I
You
can
hear
hear
me?
you. Okay, yes, I can hear you. All right.
Okay.
So you weren't raised in a Christian home. You were raised in a Muslim home, correct?
Right.
Right. So you growing up in a Muslim home, because I've heard this story like a million times. So I know I'm going with your essay and your, with some of the stuff that I already know. So you being raised in a Muslim household, your father was a devout Muslim,
Right.
but you felt like it was not the religion the relationship with God that you wanted and things like that. You kind of start sneaking to church. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So, I did grow up in a Muslim home. For me, I've never been able to really put it into words, but for me, it always felt like this isn't it.
Okay.
It always felt like something's missing from it.
Mm-hmm.
And so outside of my household, I had Christian family members, and I would like visit church with them here and there, like if I stayed the night at an aunt's house or uncle's house, and my parents were okay with that as long as I wasn't consistently, there. But the more I went, the more I understood, and the more I was like, okay, this feels like it feels right, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So at 12, I got saved, and by then, I was actually going more frequently. And when my dad found out, he was upset about it. So at that point, I started sneaking to church.
Mm-hmm.
And sneaking to church, it helped me develop my relationship with God, but it also helped me to begin to seek the word on my own. I kind of learned how to do that and how to get an understanding of it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So this went on for a couple of years, and I eventually ended up relocating with my parents from New Jersey to Atlanta. And before that, I used to watch like BET and different stations and see like different, preachers on TV. So I was, sneak and watch it on my own. And I never really paid, I guess at that time, and I was still a child, I didn't really pay attention to names or things like that. So I ended up visiting one of those ministries when I moved here, not realizing until I saw the pastor that it was one of the preachers that I was watching on TV as a child. But for me, moving here and actually freely going to church was a different experience. And at the time, it wasn't something that my father was in agreement with. So it wasn't hidden, but it was still just something that we just didn't speak of.
Right. So your father wasn't in Georgia. Your father was still in New Jersey.
He was
Correct?
he was here at one time. He was here.
Okay.
He was here for maybe 6 months, maybe
Okay.
longer.
Okay.
And then he ended up going back to New Jersey.
Going back to New Jersey. Okay. So then you joined this church, right?
Right. Right.
It's a ministry in Atlanta, right?
Right.
And tell me about that experience when you joined this church, because you wrote your essay about joining this ministry and kind of feeling at home.
Right.
Right. Okay.
So in joining this, like I said, even when I was sneaking to church in New Jersey, I was sneaking to a very small church. It was a very small church. So in coming here, I never knew what a mega church was. And this church was compared to where I came from, huge. Right. So for me, it was very exciting because I was around so many, what I thought were like-minded people. So right. For me, it was something new, but it was exciting. And it was like, I could be around Christian people for real, you know?
Right.
And it's a lot of them. So for me, it was just like, and it sounds odd saying that coming from New Jersey to Atlanta, because Atlanta is a lot slower paced than New Jersey. But right. As far as the ministry, it was so big compared to the church I come from, and I got to connect with people, and I got to be more involved than I was before, and I got to learn different things. So it was just a complete difference.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So when you got there, you immediately got involved with the youth ministry.
Right.
Right. And you were kind of you had two particular leaders that took you up under their wing.
There were two that I latched onto.
Okay.
Who, one of them was she was from New York. So she kind of understood, as me being a teenager, what a culture shock it was for me, coming from New Jersey to Georgia, and how I was adjusting. So I really latched on to her. And then there was another one in particular, and I'll never forget one of the reasons that I liked him was because he looked like my Uncle Kenny to me. He looked just like my Uncle Kenny. And so, and meeting him and him getting to know my background and where I come from, he thought it was just very interesting and fascinating that here this girl came from a whole different area, whole different religion, and she's so committed, to the things of the ministry. So those were two leaders in particular that I did latch onto in the youth ministry.
Now, the one was a woman and one was a man, correct?
Right.
Okay. Now, it was the man who actually eventually went on to do the sexual assault, correct?
Right.
Okay. So let's get to that part, because I know that at one point he considered you his goddaughter.
Right.
Okay. And so there were times when you would go to his house to spend the night, to babysit his children, and he's married, and that whole thing. So tell me kind of how that, when the first incident happened, the first crossing of that line, the first incident of assault happened. Mm. How long did you know him at this point before this particular incident happened?
Maybe about a year, maybe a little longer.
Okay.
So it was, at this time, he didn't have like small children, but a lot of the adult leaders in the youth ministry did. And I would spend a night, me as well as a group of my friends, we would spend a night at some of their houses to watch their kids for them. They'd ask us, or they'd bring our children to us. So him in particular, sometimes I'd stay the night there, and sometimes I'd stay the night with friends there at his house with him and his wife. and they were all like, it was just always a fight, always arguing
between he and his wife.
him and his wife.
Okay.
And on this particular day, I had been laying on the couch asleep, and I woke up to them arguing.
Okay. And you were there with friends, or you were there by
No,
yourself?
I was there alone on this particular
day. You were there
day.
alone this particular time. Okay.
Right. I was there alone, and I woke up to them arguing. So I just was.
And how old were you? Tell me how old were you?
I was 15.
You were 15 at the time. Okay, go ahead.
So I was laying on the couch, and he came downstairs. And I heard the door slam behind him, and he came downstairs and sat on the couch and was just going off about how, she's not the one for him. He doesn't, she doesn't understand the call in his life and all these other things. So I was just kind of laying there like, oh, okay. And then he proceeded to come over and he grabbed my chest and he started, right. Okay. And he just started rubbing on me. So I'm just like, okay, what's going on? Like, what's happening? So I moved his hands and he put them back, and he was just like, this is a different type of relationship that we have. It's one that God ordained, and many people won't understand it. He was like, and you may not understand it either right now, but over time you will understand what is going on. And in that moment, there was the other leader who I latched onto. He said her name in particular, and he said, you could never tell her because she never understands. And that was
can you tell me, because I'm sure your mind probably was like,
what is going on?
Probably was having almost kind of like an out-of-body experience. Can you tell me what you were thinking at that moment? Like, what were you thinking?
So in that moment, I'm like, this is not God at all, but it caught me so off guard. I didn't even know how to handle it. So I kind of just was like, I was crying because I'm like, this is so awkward. And it was the farthest thing from my mind that would ever happen there. Right. And so
because you trusted him.
Right.
Right.
So I remember I was crying, and when he was finished, he just kind of got up and walked out of the room. And I just blamed there like, okay.
Finished? What do you mean when he was finished?
He was fondling me, and at the same time that he was fondling me, he was playing with himself. So when I say he was finished, I'm assuming he had reached his peak. Got you. And so at that time he got up and he left, and I just kind of laid there like stunned,
like what happened. Okay, so then you get up, you leave, right? But that was just the first incident that happened, right?
Right.
So it happens again.
Right.
How, like, because I know, and one of the things I want to make sure that I make a statement here. I'm only gonna ask this for the sake of asking, but let me make myself very, very clear about this. A lot of times we question people and we say, why did you go back? We never blame the victim, because at the end of the day, she was 15 years old. He was a grown man.
I mean, I can answer it without a problem.
Yeah, but go ahead. You go ahead. But I just want to make it clear, because people ask those types of questions, and it's almost like we re-victimize the victim. And so tell me, what was it like? Tell me about that.
So it was a number of reasons, and I went back over an extended period of time until I literally until I graduated high school. When I turned 18, I cut all communication with him at that time. But I kept going back because I didn't want to change my normal, and people began to ask why, because I was embarrassed and I didn't want to say why.
Okay.
I was embarrassed because here I am. I'm already not supposed to be, in church and involving myself with people of ministry. This is what I've been taught, and I've done it, and look what it's led to. Right. And on top of that, I had a fear of people, because of who he was, people saying, oh, she's lying. So right. I didn't change my routine because I didn't want questions asked. Okay. And the older I got, the more I was like, they can ask whatever questions they want. I'm not going over there. I don't have anything to say with them.
But he continued as you went back.
Right.
So can you give me an estimate? Say about how many times do you think that occurred over however period of time?
Anywhere from 10 to 15, maybe 20 times.
Okay. Over a course of maybe what, a year, 2 years?
Yeah, 2 years.
2 years. Okay.
A little
Okay.
over 2 years.
A little bit over 2 years. Okay. So when you, and I want to interject something here, because at this time when this happened, I did not live in Atlanta at the time. I moved up later. Okay. I had met you maybe once or twice before. You always seemed very nice, very quiet, or whatever. One of the red flags for me, okay, once we kind of start putting the pieces together later, one of the red flags for me was when I initially moved there and I became a volunteer at the ministry, and I was serving in the youth ministry. And this particular minister pulled me to the side and spoke to me for approximately 2 hours about how you were a troubled child and this and this and this. And at that time, you were working for someone in my family. So I think the assumption was that you and I were in close relation at that time, but we had not gotten to that place. And so he was trying to cover his tracks with me, you know, basically to destroy your character, to say, you know, she's a troubled kid, she comes from a broken home, you know, she lies, she this. So he's like, I just want you to kind of look out for her because she's my goddaughter. And if you could just look out for her, you know, whatever. So I'm kind of coming in blind. Like, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I didn't see that about her, but okay, you know, fine. You know, that's a part of my ministry. I serve young women, I minister to young women, so of course. And so I would hear you when I would come to your office where you worked, and I would hear the comment about this particular man being your godfather, and you would always refute and say, no, he is not my godfather. And then, you know, little jokes or whatever they would make, but you would never verbally say anything. So I do want to know that I was actually witness to parts of the grooming process, or parts of the covering of his tracks, if that makes any sense. You know what I'm saying? So I actually witnessed, and that's just only one part. Trust me, it's other stuff we're going to interject there. But now talk about, let's fast forward a little bit. You decide to cut ties. Then you get to the point where you need to tell. Okay? You get to the point where you want to tell. And I think this is where the story gets really heartbreaking for me. It's when you finally get the courage to say, this is what happened to me. Can you tell me what happened? You went to the female leader first. So we'll start there.
So before I even go into that, I was never going to tell.
Okay.
Ever.
Okay.
Ever. I was never going to tell. What began to happen was when I drew, because not only did I draw away from this individual, I kind of tried to stay away from the youth ministry at the same time. And I would always bump into people, and I didn't stay away from the church. I stayed away from the youth ministry. Right. Why we don't see you no more? Oh, you backsliding? Like, you know, people would make little jokes and comments, and there were several people who would pull me to the side and tell me that this youth pastor in particular had told them certain stories, like the one he told you. He told them I was very promiscuous.
That you were high school dropout. Yeah, he told me that.
He told me that. People would tell me that I had an abortion. I was carrying twins and I aborted them. The only person I've ever slept with is my husband. He would just, and people would come to me like, why are you bugging? Why are you, out wilding? And why are you doing these things? And why is he, you know what I'm saying? Why won't you talk to him? And I would be kind of caught off guard up until they became more frequent. And I was just like, he's just making up anything to anybody. And y'all are coming back to tell me. And it's just so much mess. And I stay away from him on purpose. Right. So the more people would come to me, the more I would get agitated. And it was like, okay, well, at this point, something has to be said. I need to tell them what is really going on so we can put a stop to all of this. And so I went to the female
No
leader
leader.
who I
Okay.
was close with. And it took me a long time. First of all, it took me 7 years to say something. And even when I was ready to tell her, it like she was kind of like, okay, spit it out. Because it took me a long time to finally get it out.
Mm-hmm.
And when I told her, she was in shock. And she was just like, I believe you, but don't say anything to anybody else. And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, leave this between you and I. She was like, I've seen different instances with similar situations, and it's going to leave you hurt and him with a slap on the wrist if you say something. So be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And I like, at this point, I'm not willing to be quiet anymore because this has to stop. And
Now,
so,
when she made that comment, put a pin right there. Now, when she made that comment, she didn't she say something about she's seen this happen before, nothing usually ever happens, so
mm-hmm,
she doesn't want you hurt. So obviously there was a culture of this type of behavior that had often been swept under the rug. So she's trying to warn you to say, listen, this gonna be just like every other time, this getting swept under the rug, pretty much, right?
right.
Okay, all right, continue. I'm sorry.
Okay. And so, she was just like, I'm going to talk to my husband. I'm going to let him know what's going on, and we're going to figure out how to get through this. Later that evening, I got a call from her husband asking me what happened. I told him, everything that had gone on. And he said, well, I'm going to call him and I'm going to confront him, and we're going to deal with this immediately. And so for me, I trusted them. So I trusted them. Her and her husband, I trusted them. So when he said that, I was like, okay, it kind of gave me a sense of relief. And in turn, what it turned into, in my opinion, was them kind of warning him, hey, she's about to speak up. So you might want to get ready.
Right.
And so from there is when it turned into a huge disaster, basically.
And so I remember, because I was witness of all of this part, because
right.
this was like
right.
almost like this has been 11 years of stuff
right.
that, now this is something that I witnessed. And when because you finally told me, I remember the day where we were in the office and you told me, I believed you immediately because I know that spirit. I could identify, and I'm like, you ain't got to be that saved to look at him and tell that he's full of lust. And so that's not a hard thing to believe, but all of the other pieces of why he would come to me asking questions about you, trying to find out where you were, trying to see what I knew. And the time he pulled me to the side on another occasion, me and a friend of mine, to tell us the story that happened between the two of you. He just put two other people's names in it to see how I was going to respond. He wanted to see how we were going to react, to see if we knew about, if you had said anything to me. So there was a grooming, there were different things that he would throw out over the years and over time, that it kind of just clicked in me, and I immediately knew, oh yeah, this kid is telling the truth. Of course he did. Of course he said that. And so there was an incident with this particular pastor. We were at a affirmation ceremony of a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours. And we were at her house, at her family's house, and we were sitting down, me and a friend of mine, and we're talking, and he came over to confess, and this is the real talk. He says, I just been so horny lately. Now this is the youth pastor is talking to two youth workers, females, single females, okay? So we looked at him and said, you might want to go and tell your wife that. And we turned around and kept talking. So he's still talking beside us. And of course that's grooming too, because you're trying to see if we are going to take the bait. Let me see if we're going to take the bait. Oh, would you, child? Stop. You need to go your tail over there and tell your wife. You don't bring that over here. We at a church function, right?
And I didn't come to and I did not come to her ceremony because I knew he was going to be doing it.
I figured as much. I figured as much. And so when you went through all of that, that was also happening at the same time. So now you tell the leader. She says, don't say anything. She tells her husband. The husband showcases outrage. But then what ends up happening is they kind of give him a heads up. Hey, just what's getting ready to happen. You might want to, kind of protect yourself. So then you get a call from the top administrators of the mega ministry.
Right.
Now, okay, tell me what happened after that.
So I get a call from one of the higher ups, and he tells me he's been made aware of what has taken place. He wants me to come in on that Friday and meet with him and his wife so that the situation can be dealt with. Mm-hmm. So I did go in on that Friday. So, okay, and here's the thing. When I went on that Friday, you went with me.
Yes.
Because you didn't want me to go by myself.
Right.
And so when we got there, he told you could not come in.
Right.
And I went to the back with him and his wife, and they pulled out their notebooks and pens to take notes, and they asked me in detail what had happened, how long, and why I didn't say anything, and everyone who knew. And while I was going into detail and telling them what had gone on, his wife got really upset. Mm-hmm. And one thing in particular she said was, we need to deal with this, and we need to deal with this right now. This is not okay. And he looked at his wife and he told her, and I need you to sit back and be quiet. And she didn't say anything else the rest of the meeting, and he continued to ask me questions, and he continued to take notes. And then he got up and he said, thank you. I'm gonna sorry, I'm trying not to say names. I'm gonna follow up with the senior pastor. Mm-hmm. Because he's been made aware of the situation. I'm going to follow up with him because he'd like to meet with you. So I'm going to be calling you because I need you to come back up here on Monday to meet with him. This was a Friday. I never heard from them ever again.
Right. And that's been 11 years.
That's been...
Yeah. Yeah. Because I
2009.
Certain, because certain landmarks. Yeah. Yes, it's been 11 years. Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. It was in 2009. Yeah. Because, So, I never heard from them again. At that time, I was moving to Birmingham. And so I was moving to Birmingham to actually serve in ministry and to get away from this. Because in this time, and it was always in the back of my mind, because this affected the way I looked on ministry. Yeah. Dramatically. Yeah. But I didn't want it to affect my relationship with God. And so I moved because I had met a group of people, developed friendships with these people who were in ministry, and it was effective ministry. Mm-hmm. And so I was moving to Birmingham, and I ended up moving to Birmingham shortly after this meeting that I had with one of the head officials at the church. Mm-hmm. And they were aware why I was moving there. They were aware of what ministry. They were well aware. Mm-hmm. At the time, the female leader who I said I trusted a lot, we still would communicate sometimes. She would call me here and there, and she would check on me and to see how I was enjoying the ministry and how I liked Birmingham and things like that. And on one particular day, she informed me that they were coming to visit, and she was coming with the person who had sexually abused me. Yeah. She was coming with the official that I had met with, who I never heard from again. Yes. And I did not say that in that meeting when he stood up, he let me know that his job was to protect the integrity of the ministry, and this was something he could not allow to get out. And I just want to make that a key point, that those were his exact words. So
let's back up a little bit then. Slow down a little bit. So this administrator, this person who actually conducted the investigative interview, made a statement that said it was his job to protect the integrity of the ministry. And this was something that he could not allow to get out. I just want to make sure that's what the man of God said. Okay, got you. Okay, just want to make sure that's what that was. Okay, so then you get to this
away from them. I get away from them.
Wait, got you.
And they come to Birmingham. The lady who I said I trusted, she came with the child molester. She came with the official who I met with, and she came with the senior pastor's wife to this ministry that
with a busload of children. Yes.
Yes. And
yes.
and at the time she was aware that I was in charge of out-of-town guests.
Yes.
I sectioned off seating for these guests. I greeted them at the door and walked them to their seats once they registered. And she came and she registered with these same individuals who also, by the way, snuck in the back while everyone else was lined up waiting for service to start, came in the back with the staff and had to be escorted out by one of our security guards.
I remember that.
But they came and registered, and then she's knowing full well that I do registration and I seat out of town guests. So it was almost like a spit in the face, like, we know what happened, nothing was done, and we're gonna come sit in a whole different ministry with you.
Right. So now, so I just kind of want to paint the picture a little bit, because we're talking about sexual assault in the mega church. And now we're at the point of, you have told, you've reported it, right? And the assailant, the pedophile, has a history of going and telling different stories in order to diminish your character. I do know he said something to me. I know other people he said things to, okay, in order to diminish your character. That happened. And then the other email leader that you were trusting, that you were confiding in, is now going back, feeding intel to someone that she is aware that has been an assailant. One of the issues that I think I had, that was like one of the biggest issues, is that when you're called to ministry and you're called to serve, especially when you're called to serve women, you can't turn around and re-victimize them by handling the situation this way. I think that's one of the most disappointing things, because I do remember actually driving over to Birmingham that evening when this situation happened, and I recall the female leader trying to keep pulling you to the side. And the other leaders of the church that you were serving at were well aware of the molestation. They were aware of the abuse. They were aware of the investigation that had not been investigated. As a matter of fact, after the investigation happened, he ended up becoming the main youth pastor.
Right. At the time, he was just a youth leader. Once everything came out, he was like promoted to the pastor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So he ended up getting a promotion, honestly, after that happened. So you move away, and then they come to your space now, and then trying to corner you to try to talk to you, and you need to speak to me, and you need to.
Well, they said they were coming to check out the ministry because they heard so much about it.
Right.
One thing in particular that bothered me on this particular evening was when they were getting ready to leave, the leader who I told you I was very attached to, she came to me and she said, "Hey, such and such, the guy who had sexually abused me, is thirsty. Can you get him a bottle of water?"
Ridiculous. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm supposed to take my emotion out of this interview. I'm sorry. Ridiculous. Ridiculous.
And even then, I didn't really see her the way I see her now. Because even then she would still call and check on me, and I always thought it was out of a good place until I realized that a lot of things that I said to only her, he was made aware of. And it took me a long time to see it that way.
Yeah. Okay, so now they've gone over there. They brought the investigating minister. They brought the pedophile. They brought the senior pastor's wife. And they brought their ministry, over there. All of a sudden,
other adult leaders, and they brought
other adult leaders and stuff like that.
Yes.
And you were in another state, so they had to get a bus to come over to another state.
Right.
Pretty much. Okay. So then,
there's millions of churches in Atlanta. But they cross state lines to come around.
Yeah, to come to check that out. Absolutely. Okay, so after that goes on, after all that happens, they come back here. He had them been made like the youth leader, the main. Yeah,
he was the youth pastor. Yes, he was over the youth pastor
at this point. You received an email
So I only stayed in Birmingham for a year.
Okay.
I stayed in Birmingham for a year, and I ended up moving back to Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And when I moved back to Atlanta, I was working for your same family member when I came back. I started working there again.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at work one day and I was checking my email, not my work emails, but my personal emails. And I got an email from this same head
Investigating minister, yes.
Yeah, I don't know what to call him. I got an email from this same person just letting me know that I was not allowed there and I could not serve in their ministry under any capacity. They did not want me on their campus.
But they kept the pedophile. I just want to make that clear. They kept the pedophile and kicked out the victim.
And at the time, the lady who I once trusted, she was still calling me and she would make me aware of certain things. So there were other things that had taken place that she would tell me, but she would not. I know she wouldn't always tell me everything, but just enough to kind of say, to ask a question, to kind of get information out of me, to see, where I was with it. And I now know, at the time I didn't, but I now know it was just to relay information to them.
Right. And so now all of this time has passed. And this is actually your first time talking about this publicly. So you're talking about you reported it 11 years ago. But even up to a couple of months ago, the assailant, the pedophile, the perpetrator was still showing up to places where you were worshiping. He was still showing up to places where you were having events. He was still showing up to these places and making comments like, I'm paying people to watch you.
So here's what happened.
Okay.
When I moved back to Atlanta at that time, I had left Birmingham. I came back to Atlanta, and I was living in Atlanta, and like I said, the lady I trusted would still contact me here and there. And at one time, she would call me, and she would say, "I just want you to talk to him, meet with him. Hear his heart. He wants to apologize." And a comment that her husband made one time was, you told, you got relief, you told, and you ruined his life, you ruined his ministry, you caused, confusion in his marriage. The least you could do is talk to him and give him some closure.
Okay. And I know he said that, and we're gonna put a pin right there real in a moment. Now we're talking about the sexual assault in church. How dare you, as a man or woman of God,
as a father,
and as a father, but you say that you belong to Christ. When Jesus says, suffer the little children and forbid them not, Jesus cares about children. Jesus says that children are his heritage. He cares about that. So now you're going to say, and because this is not just this isolated incident, you're talking about a culture in the faith. This is a culture. See, because when people get that comfortable to say that foolishness, and then you're walking around with a title, and you're walking around and you're quoting scriptures, I just want to be vehemently, declaratively clear that that statement was demonic. That statement was not of God. For you to tell a victim that she owes it to her assailant because she ruined his life. No. He ruined his own life when he violated an innocent child. He ruined his own marriage when he put his hands on a child to sexually assault them. So shame on you, sir, you ma'am, you person, anybody who is actually re-victimizing, re-raping, and re-assaulting God's children. Shame on you. And I know the people that we're talking about, they're going to see this. So I'm asking you, even as you're watching this, you need to repent. All right, I'm done with my soapbox. Go on, finish.
So, like I said, she would continually ask me just to hear him out and accept his apology. She knew that it was for my benefit. And I said no. Over the course of a few years, I said no, and it didn't stop. So eventually I said, you know what? One day I was just like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna come up there and I'm gonna meet with y'all and I'm gonna see what he has to say. And so his apology to me was that he's sorry for what he done. He done at the time. He did not know it was wrong. He
So
said
he did
that
not know that grabbing your breast and ejaculating and masturbating in front of you as a Christian married man was wrong. That's what he's saying.
he said that he didn't know it was wrong at the time, and that had he known it would have had a lasting effect on me, he never would have done it. But he believes that we are still called to do ministry together, and he knows that one day that day will come. And that he has even had people watching me over the last few years just so they can update him on things that are taking place in my life. And that was his apology to me. And when he gave me that apology, the female who I once trusted, she was sitting there in the room with us.
Lord,
and also I was told, she told me that the story he told her was quite different from mine. He told her that there was one time that he was putting cream on me because I suffered from eczema and he accidentally touched my breast.
And that's what he told me too. That's what he told me too, because I asked.
She said he told her. But that was his apology to me. And I had already begun looking at her in particular different because of the way things was handled and the way that I trusted her so much and how she dealt with it. But after that particular apology, I was done with all of it.
Right. Now tell me about your personal healing process. Can you tell me, because you've come a long way from that, like, and I believe, you know, your process is still going, like your healing is ongoing, but you have come a long way from where you were. If there was a young lady watching you, because somebody is watching this, is gonna see this, that is sitting in the seat where you sat, can you give practical wisdom, biblical wisdoms on how God healed you and like what you had to do to kind of get to even this place, even though I know your healing is ongoing?
So for me, my healing process was particularly hard because of the way it was dealt with, and because for me it was kind of a secret because it was kept from, you know, a lot of people in the ministry, but I even kept it from my family. So for me, it was very hard to heal because it was something that I had to pretend never happened. And once I got to recently the point where I'm able to talk about it and be okay and acknowledge it and, you know, say, yeah, it took me 7 years to say something, but I wasn't the one wrong in the situation.
Right.
That's when my healing really began to take place. And the most, I guess, helpful part of that healing was being able to find other little girls and really just love on them and keep them encouraged. That's something that has actually helped me in my healing process a lot.
It's serving other people in this position. Wow. And so, you're starting, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
And so, like I said, it took a long time and it was hard because I had to keep it a secret. So you can't heal from something that's never happened. And if I have to walk around and pretend that it never happened, I'm gonna be walking around jacked up because of something that somebody else did wrong. Right. So I had to. So
your first step of healing was saying something.
Right.
That was your first step. So,
but at the time, I did not know that.
Right, because and this is the crazy thing, because even when you talk about the female leader's husband who made the statement that you owe it to the perpetrator because you ruined his life, and so to the young girl who may be watching this, because they don't say,
and even in saying that, it didn't ruin his ministry, it didn't ruin his family,
right,
because he got a promotion in that same ministry.
Yeah.
Even though I was told, but you don't know that he had to do desk work for 3 weeks before that promotion. Oh, okay. Okay. So it didn't ruin anything because it was church politics, and there was this group of people around him who made it their mission to protect him,
right,
and to shun me.
Right. And so if someone is watching, what would you advise that little girl, that young lady who has gone through this, and has never said anything? Advise her. What would you do? Even and tomorrow we're going to actually have a Christian licensed therapist online, and she's going to talk about the um, emotional, psychological effects and healing steps and things like that. But as a person who has dealt with it, because you, like, even when it came to forgiveness, I know that was kind of thrown in your face a lot. Like, doing this whole thing, it's like,
Yeah, that I was
you
holding
need to
on to
forgive, you need to
unforgiveness and
forgive,
was right.
huh?
And that I was holding on to unforgiveness and
Yes.
that it was going to affect my life because I hadn't forgiven him, by basically saying it's okay for him to come around. It's okay for you to, and I would never set foot back on that campus ever. You couldn't pay me to go back over there. But basically, it wasn't the ministry's fault. It was his fault. And you're holding on to unforgiveness, which is going to affect you in the long run. I'm not holding on to unforgiveness. And no, it's not the ministry's fault, but the ministry handled it very, very wrong. To
And it's
keep
their
out
fault
of the
now.
eye of
It's
the
their fault
media.
now. Yeah.
To keep out
Yeah.
of the eye of the media. And I was made aware that I was not his only victim in that ministry.
Right.
And now it's their fault because they never addressed it and they allowed it to continue to happen.
Right. So if you are a young lady and you're watching, or a young man, because hey, this demon has no discrimination when it comes to gender. If you are sitting and you're watching this and you're like, I have gone through this. First thing I want you to realize that it is not your fault if someone preys on you and violates you. It is not your fault. Do not fall prey or re-victimized by people shouting a lot of spiritual jargon at you, because they'll, oh, you ain't walking in forgiveness. Well, it's possible to forgive someone and still hold them accountable. It's still possible to forgive someone and still report them to the police. It is still possible. So don't. Oh, and then the other one, touch not thine anointed. I'm anointed too. The person that you put your hands on, God has anointed. So so don't fall into that because that's kind of like the plan of the enemy, to kind of take your mind and bog you down and put you in a prison in your mind, to make you think that you don't have a right to say anything, that you don't have a right to speak out. And so, Stacey, do you have some information? I do know that you have an organization that you've started to help women, young ladies, girls who have gone through this. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So, yeah, but first let me say to, girls or young women who are experiencing it or have, the first step is to speak up.
Yeah.
And I wish that, and I can't change it, but the first person I should have told was my mother instead of that female leader. And it should have been legally handled instead of me going to the top of the ministry. So that is my advice. Tell your parents and let it be legally dealt with, especially if it's in ministry. Because I didn't know that it was so common, and that ministries will cover it up and they'll excuse it or they'll blame the victim, and it'll never be dealt with, and it'll continue to happen. So that's my advice. As far as the organization is in the beginning stages, and it is really just to mentor young women who've gone through it, and to also get them the counseling that they need to walk through their healing process, to get them the medical attention they may need, and to help them with legal resources so that the assailant can be dealt with. Right now, I do have a Facebook page, and it's called Diamond Girl. And there is contact information on the Facebook page as well as the website.
I'll put that all under the thing. So
okay.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much it. I think the legal aspect is the biggest thing that was kept out of this.
Yeah.
And I realize now that it was kept out of it, not even for him by the ministry, but for themselves. It was for that church in particular to keep themselves covered. It from legal activity and from the media, because they've been in the media numerous times for different things. And I think that's why his particular words to me were his job is to protect the integrity of the ministry, and he couldn't allow it to get out. And at the time, I loved my church, so that was the farthest thing from my mind. So I didn't realize it until later what he was really saying, and what they were really
I gotta
doing.
protect what we got going on here. We can't worry about you, so you're gonna have to go on the outside and figure out what you're gonna do, pretty much.
But then I was told don't come back, so
and then you were told not to come back. And so even people who are dealing with suicidal thoughts, I know that you dealt with that at one point. Can you kind of speak to that?
So sure. I actually tried to commit suicide my junior year of high school because of this situation, because I didn't know how to handle it, and I didn't know how to say anything. And like I said, I was embarrassed, and so I felt like my only way of escape, like to get away from the situation, was to just really get away from the situation. And so I ended up in ICU after this attempt, and the very first visitor I had was the person who had sexually assaulted.
Was the pedophile. So the church, Lord, the ministry sent the pedophile up there to the hospital. The reason why you were in there in the first place, he was the one that showed up. And then didn't he ask you for a testimony, for you to record a testimony?
Right. So basically, he coached me on how to give the testimony about it when I was turned to the youth ministry. I was a junior in high school, but basically he coached me basically on what to say in a video interview for one of the annual youth conferences.
For the boldness, my God. When I tell you that devil don't have no, oh, Jesus. Whew. Wow. So if you are a ministry even watching this, and I know many people probably will be pastors and things like that, I think it's very important that you put protocols in place to deal with this, because you want to be on the right side of judgment. Because at the end of the day, I don't care what nobody say, everybody got to stand for Jesus. Everybody. Nobody gets by. And so my mama used to say that all the time. She said, honey, you can put it in the ground if you want to. It's coming back up. Don't nobody get by.
Now, I believe that they feel they're untouchable.
Right.
And I believe that they feel that they are untouchable.
Right.
I know that they did meet about it, and I know that it was the legal aspect of it was discussed amongst them, and their thing was, she's not going to do anything, so, just wait till the statute of limitations is reached, and then we're clear. I know that was discussed by them.
Right.
I know that even in that, because I stay clear away from all of these people. He's tried to here and there show up to places where people know that I am.
Yeah.
He's trying to show up, and it's always an awkward situation, because if he's with like his wife, he won't say anything. You'll just always see him in the corner wherever you are, just looking. But I know that one time in particular, he came to a festival that I was at, and everywhere I went, he somehow just happened to be.
Even but he never areas where he wasn't supposed to be.
Right. He never said anything. And I remember at one point, I don't know if he sent his wife and children to the car or what, but he came to the stage where I was checking in artists, although he's not an artist, just to say hello. And it was just an awkward encounter, because I was just trying to figure out why you were speaking to me at all and why you were anywhere that I was at all. So it's always just like an awkward, I'm going to pop up here and there just to throw in your face that I got away with something type of experience. It's just weird.
Right. And that's kind of like that's predatory behavior. You understand what I'm saying? Like that's all it's textbook. And the therapist is actually going to talk more about that tomorrow. It's textbook predatory behavior. And so we as the body of Christ, we as the church, we have to hold up the standard of Christ Jesus. I spoke about Revelation chapter 2. God had been dealing with me about this particular topic since last year, and how he said his judgment, he's coming to judge this, and we're in a season of that. If you open your eyes, you kind of see what's going on. And so Revelation chapter 2 talks about, how we have allowed the spirit of Jezebel to stand in our pulpits and preach and have sexual immorality spread throughout the congregations. And that spirit Jezebel refused to repent. And a man can be a Jezebel too. Okay. So say that person refuses to repent. So Jesus said, okay, well, since y'all didn't deal with it, church, now I gotta come and put her on a sick bed and kill her children. And that's the judgment that Jesus, and those words have been read. So I know we talk about the Lamb of God, Jesus, and Lord, he had all this nice little cottony hair, walking around with sandals, talking about peace. But there was a part, honey, where Jesus said, no, make no mistake. You didn't repent, I'm coming to deal with it. And so nobody is above the word of God and the judgment of God when it comes to stuff like that. Like, nobody gets by. I don't care. You can have 30,000 members of your church. Nobody gets by. Nobody. So,
I want to. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm done.
I just want to say I want to make a point that there were some people who said this is wrong and it needs to be dealt with, and a lot of those people were told not to come back, just like I was.
Yeah, it was like a big slew kicking out around all the same time. It was a big slew of folks,
right? Making announcements and things like that.
Yeah.
But I know that there was so when I went to have my meeting with one of the top officials of the church and his wife, he told me he thought I needed counseling, and he sent me down to talk to one of the ministers. And it was a female, and he told me I could talk to her and tell her everything, but I could not name names. He told me I could not tell her the name of the person who had said
I got to be clear now. I want to make sure that I need clarity. So the investigating minister
told me I could not say
names. You no, see, and this is what we talk about, manipulation, using your power for evil. See, so they tell you, okay, we're gonna send you to a counselor. That's an in-house person, a minister of the church. However, I'm gonna give you safeguards of what you can and cannot say.
Because he said he had to meet with the senior pastor because they were going to deal with it and call me back. So he sent me down to her office, and I gave her, I told her everything in detail, and she told me I was not going to leave her office until I gave her name, because this was going to be dealt with, and she was going to make sure it was dealt with. And I would not tell her his name because I was told not to. And eventually I just went ahead, I told her his name. And she said, okay, we're going to deal with this. And she took my information, and she said, and I'm going to call you myself. I don't know. I never heard from her, and I never saw her again.
You never saw her again.
I was told that she was gone completely from the ministry.
Nobody had an explanation why she was gone.
I'm not sure if she quit. I'm not sure if she was fired. I was just told she's gone.
Right.
I can speculate. I'm pretty sure I know what happened, because I know that there were other people who said this is wrong and we need to do what's right, and they were told, okay, well, you can't come back either.
Yeah, and they was kicked out too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
I can't state it as a fact, but I think I know what happened to her.
Wow. So before we go, because we're gonna do this is part 1. We're doing part 2 tomorrow, because we're gonna have the therapist, Miss Javona, on the line tomorrow. And we're also, I'm actually trying to find an attorney, because I know with the statute of limitation, that law has changed in the state of Georgia. It has changed. So they have lifted the statute of limitations. And that may have been in a lot of different states. If you have been molested or raped or something like that, they have lifted the statute of limitations. So I'm still poaching attorneys to interview also concerning this, for people who may need legal counsel or help in whatever area you may be in. So before we go, though, I would like you to pray for the men and women that may be watching, that may be dealing with this, and that just may need, you know, strength to hold on, you know, because I believe that time of God restoring his people, the cries of those who have, who the world looks at as insignificant, because okay, you got this big old machine of ministry, but then this is one person, and so that whole dynamic has shifted completely. And so God is now